you. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the RCE Greater Atlanta. For those of you who do not know, UNRCE stands for the United Nations Regional Center of Expertise, and it's a group of us who are striving to promote education and training people on the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals. My name is Margaret Lowe. I am your moderator today, and this is the Marvelous Mondays initiative. We started this initiative because we were hearing so much bad news that we wanted to be intentional about sharing good news that is happening across our network, so mostly Atlanta and the greater Georgia area. And we wanted to provide a way for people to get involved with the good work that is happening in our network, as well as stay connected and to get to know one another. So each month we have a speaker who covers a topic on the Sustainable Development Goals and then how to get involved. Last month we had Dr. Beth Cabrera speaking about personal resilience and well-being. And today's speaker is Miss Suzanne Burns. And so Suzanne is the CEO and founder of the Collective Wisdom Group and director of Just Growth, Equitable Development for the Partnership for Southern Equity. In her past, she has also been the executive director of Sustainable Atlanta, as well as the assistant director for the Sustainability Division of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. She brings more than 27 years of experience in sustainability, community development, and environmental justice to her leadership of the Just Growth portfolio for the Partnership for Sustainable Equity. And she's passionate and focused on pursuing an equitable, green, and resilient world. So I wanted us to welcome her, and she's going to be highlighting some well-known as well as some lesser-known stories across Atlanta at the intersection of racial equity and the environment. Go ahead, Suzanne. Thank you for speaking to us.
All right. Well, thank you, Margaret, and thanks everybody for taking some time to be together today. It's nice to see so many familiar faces and old friends and new. I am going to talk today at sort of a high level about a pretty wide variety of different organizations that are doing good work in Metro Atlanta that I feel like is probably not known as well as it should be. So let's see. This is really happening at a lot of different scales, and I feel like all of the organizations that I'm going to touch on are folks that could use more visibility, more volunteers, more donors, more collaborators. And so I hope that this will be a chance for you to get introduced to some folks that you want to connect with and try to explore some of those ways that you might work with them. Those of you who have dealt with raising small children in different circumstances have probably all had conversations and been in moments of sort of difficulty in the world where you read the same sort of guidance that I read on many occasions about helping young kids understand how to get through times where things look very dark or hard to understand around them. And I feel like one of those things was to help kids know that there are helpers everywhere, that even in really trying times, there are always helpers around. So I feel like I'm one of those who kind of needs reminding of that right now, with all that is surrounding us and the level of just nerves and anxiety and uncertainty that we're sort of swimming in right now. So I'm trying to focus on the helpers who are everywhere doing really good things, and hopefully you'll be inspired by some of these folks as well. I will be quick to caveat that I'm gonna move fairly quickly, and some of these folks I'll give you a quick sort of context of how I've crossed paths with them. But many of them are not necessarily going to know who I am, or they might know some of the folks that I've worked with. But please don't let that be a barrier to reaching out to them if their work inspires you and you feel like you would like to find some way to help them move forward in that. So everyone is hopefully familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17. I did not fully meet my goal today of having 17 different stories. I thought maybe I could find somebody for each of the SDGs, but I think I got most of them covered, maybe at least a dozen. And know that, of course, there are folks working on all of these SDGs locally. And it probably would be fairly easy for us to collectively kind of name off some folks that are in these particular goal areas that I'm not touching on today. So hopefully I would encourage you as we're going through this, and maybe towards the end of my sharing, I hope that you all will contribute your own 2 cents on this. And if you know of organizations that you know are specifically working around these SDGs, drop them in the chat. Feel free to give them a shout out. I think this is really all about helping us to connect more with the good stuff that's happening. So I'm going to start with one that's fairly new to me. And this is actually a brand new organization that just started this summer, the Georgia Freedom Letters. And I was fascinated to see that this is a group of folks who are really trying to look at how we can reform our judicial systems, and taking a start by connecting those who are imprisoned with the outside world in a positive way. So they have some great guidelines. They're apparently tapping into some similar sort of efforts at a larger, maybe national scale. So they have some good kind of foundational guidance on how to approach this if you want to begin some sort of letter writing kind of relationship and connect with someone who is incarcerated. But it seemed that this is something that is definitely a reflection to me of somebody working towards peace, justice, and strong institutions. And their website is below, so hopefully you will take a look at some of the work they're doing. Again, they're just getting started, so I think they could really use some help with folks signing up and just helping to share the word about this project that is getting up and running. Sweet Auburn Works is an entity that has been around probably at least 5 or 6 years. Liana Varnell is the guy who runs the organization, and they're sort of housed out of the Community Development Corporation, the Historic District, CDC, over in Sweet Auburn. And so Sweet Auburn Works is really more the business side of the house at the HDCDC. And they are very focused on trying to preserve, revitalize, and promote the commercial and cultural legacy of the Sweet Auburn Historic District. So for many of you, you may be very familiar with Sweet Auburn. If you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to do a quick little Google around and find some stories about the district. It was at one time, I believe in the early 1950s, the most prosperous African-American business district in the country, and was seen as a real model by a lot of folks. Unfortunately, due to a lot of very systemic disinvestment and structural racism policies, things like the bisection of the community by the interstate highway system, it fell into decline for many years. But there are a lot of folks trying to bring the district back, and Liano is certainly one of those. And I got to know the work that they were doing recently around a project that the Partnership for Southern Equity funded. It was they were trying to build a fund to assist some of the barbershops and beauty parlors in the community. There are more than 30 of these sort of personal care facilities, small businesses that are the backbone of the business district, and many of them have been there for decades. And of course, when COVID hit and they were struck with the difficulties of keeping their businesses afloat when they had to close their doors and had to adapt to all the new cleaning requirements and distancing, it was a real challenge for them. And so I loved that Sweet Auburn Works was trying to invest some additional resources into helping keep this sort of legacy business sector in this important community going. And there's also a guaranteed income pilot that they've been participating in, which I personally want to learn a lot more about. And this is something that Councilman Amir Faruqi is leading, but I know Sweet Auburn Works is a partner on that. So the SDG that that struck me about their work was decent work and economic growth. So I should probably disclaim that the folks that I'm referencing today, all the organizations, probably if you ask 90% of them what SDG they're working in, they would give you a blank stare and not really know what you're talking about. They've not necessarily been engaged in the RCE, so I'm hopeful that that will be something that will change as the RCE gains its own visibility as a network. But I think they might tell you different SDGs that they feel like they're working in. So this is obviously a highly subjective exercise, and many of these I think are probably working to address issues in several of the SDGs. So Sweet Auburn Works. Sister Care Alliance is another that I came in contact with recently through the Partnership for Southern Equity's COVID response funding opportunity. So we got a chance to help disperse some funds from the United Way of Georgia to a large group of, at least to take the awareness about the funding to a large group of folks working in real small sort of frontline organizations, many of them not even yet sort of 501c3 designated nonprofits. Some of them were just basically community-based operations. I think self-care, the Sister Care Alliance is actually a nonprofit. They're affiliated with a larger group. But this one I felt like was a unique offering, that they were really focused on self-care as a form of social justice. And they received some funding support through this process to particularly help women of color with learning meditation techniques and yoga and other forms of self-care, healthcare practices, that sort of thing, as a part of helping women to be able to be resilient in the face of COVID being yet another sort of set of burdens on top of historical burdens. So I don't know a whole lot about Sister Care Alliance, but I encourage you to look into them. I know that they are working with the Pro Georgia sort of alliance of not-for-profits. There are a number of different sort of women-facing organizations that are under that umbrella that Sister Care works with. And so gender equality is certainly a big concern for these ladies and the work that they're doing. The Come Up Project, I'm going to see if this video will work. Hopefully this will go okay. If I click this video and you cannot hear, somebody speak up and just let me know and we'll stop.
The truest form of freedom is being able to sustain yourself. It's a part of our culture. For me, this is the birthright, and this is ultimately freedom.
Gangsters to Growers is an agribusiness training program for formerly incarcerated youth. The mission is to end the cycle of poverty within our community, to provide a space of healing, to help support a Black-run food system, and to end recidivism in our communities.
Before I got involved with Gangsters to Growers, I was in the streets. I was incarcerated in the middle of 2015, and the experience, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
We have young people with their brains still forming, locked in a place that's not offering any types of therapy for the generational cycles of trauma that they've been through. So now we see folks that are just yearning for love and empowerment.
The neighborhood prostitute came to me and she said, in a neighborhood of death, this garden is life. And that actually took me to tears. There's life here. There's tons of life. A lot of times people let me know that the first time they seen a sunflower was in this garden.
I joined Gangsters to Growers in 2016. I learned people skills. I learned seeding, growing, harvesting, composting. It has taught me that I can grow food myself because I've seen it done. I have power.
When we developed the program, we knew that we needed to make a product. To create real generational wealth, we have to produce things. Oh, look at y'all. Oh my God, I can't take it. Y'all made me so proud.
The sauce is the boss.
The hot sauce is called Sweet Soul. What I learned from making the hot sauce is that actually cutting up the ingredients and doing every step, it makes the food better. The people love that when you tell them that you actually making it yourself.
I'm just really, really grateful for Abby, Gangsters Growers, and y'all coming here because y'all an example right now.
Right.
Miss Abby deserves the James Beard Award because she'll try to lead you in the right direction and help you no matter what. I know this because I've experienced this.
To me, the greatest seed that can ever be planted is the seed in the minds of a youth. Abby is really on the front lines and she's really doing this work.
Gangsters to Growers is saying that everyone is worthy of love, knowledge, and economic empowerment. Our goal is self-sufficiency, and James Beard Award is putting us right on that track.
All right. Hopefully y'all can hear that okay. Yeah, Abby is just amazing. She's involved in a number of different projects. And again, this was one that PSC was able to support with some of the additional efforts they were making to help get food in the hands of some of the folks that have been a part of their program who were really struggling in the face of COVID. So Come Up Project and Gangsters to Growers is definitely one that is really focused on reducing inequalities and doing some awesome stuff. I was excited to see that she had gotten the James Beard Award this year.
Suzanne,
yes.
Suzanne, is that the only thing that they produce, that hot sauce? Or do you know?
That's the one thing that I know of that I've seen them at markets with a table for their hot sauce.
Okay, that's fine. I just thought I would check.
Yeah, and I do think that they sell their produce at market, some as well, but I'm not really sure if they have any other sort of products that they're producing from their growing.
Thanks.
Sure. So let's see. Jorge Vallejo is the next one up with Upper 90. This is an organization that I've sort of recently been introduced to. They have a lot of affinity with another group that you probably heard of, Soccer in the Streets. So if the idea of soccer and using that as a leadership development tool is something that really touches you, then I would encourage you to reach out to Jorge at Upper 90 or to Soccer in the Streets. Both of those are really looking at how to help young people who are facing a lot of challenges coming from communities, whether they're largely immigrant communities or just facing a lot of other systemic barriers to success, that this is a way for them to get engaged in sport. And so certainly it's a good health and well-being sort of related effort. This one would probably be a reducing inequalities kind of connection as well. They've got some great website content, including some videos, so we'd encourage you to check that out. But it's really about youth mentoring. And during the COVID-19, they also were working on some additional food distribution to some of their kids who they couldn't, at that point early in COVID, they weren't able to bring them together to play yet, but they were able to help offset some of the food loss that they were facing because of schools being closed. Village Microfund is one that has been around for a while, and maybe some of you have been exposed to them. They have been sort of building slowly over a number of years in the realm of social enterprise, and particularly trying to connect social enterprises with finance opportunities. And they do a lot of work around like incubators with social enterprises, trying to really get them ready to go out and seek capital to grow their work. But I suspect there may be some RCE connection already with Dante and the team over there. But if not, Village Microfund is definitely one to watch. And so I sort of connected them with industry innovation and infrastructure, because I think they're really trying to help build some of that support system for local industry and innovation to grow. Housing Justice League is one that, again, hopefully some of you have heard of, but maybe not. They're a fairly new organization, I would say, in the last 2 or 3 years. Allison Johnson is the powerhouse behind it, but they've got a growing team of folks. They've been incredibly successful in really getting on the radar in the last couple of years. And the real focus of their work is around organizing in the tenant community and trying to provide support for folks who are on the brink of eviction or facing dealing with eviction, but really fighting hard for just living conditions, particularly for those who are in rental situations and in multifamily rental. So there's definitely a huge connection between folks having access to stable housing and that step over into deeper poverty. So that's where I see their work fitting. But again, this one crosses many different SDGs, and they are doing a lot of work around sort of building support for a policy platform now. They're working mostly in Southwest Atlanta, but maybe expanding a little bit into DeKalb and Fulton as well. So definitely encourage you to check out Housing Justice League and find a way to get involved in their work. Urban Recipe, I think, let's see. I don't want to take up too much time here. So I've got a video queued up in this one, but I'll hold on that because it's a slightly longer video. But I will definitely make sure that you have a copy of this deck, so you've got that. And of course, all these videos are available on folks' websites or through Vimeo or YouTube. Urban Recipe has been around for a while, and they are addressing food insecurity issues through a cooperative model, which is one of the few that I'm aware of in Metro Atlanta. I think it's a concept that is being used in a number of other cities around the country, and I think it's definitely been growing over the last few years. But the idea is not that you are a food bank recipient and that you are one who is in need and having to just sort of come and be someone accepting charity, but that you're actually an active member of a community that's helping to address food insecurity issues for the whole community. And so there is there's a membership component to it. There is you make some minor contributions towards the food itself. You put in significant volunteer hours, and there's just a tremendous community that builds around that. So they've been lifted up as a really successful model of a food cooperative here, and encourage you to look into their work. They can always use extra hands as well. This is one of the last ones, and I just had to do a little shout out for Partnership for Southern Equity, particularly around their Just Energy work. So as Margaret mentioned in the beginning, I do a tremendous amount of work with PSE now. I work more on the Just Growth, equitable development side of the house, but there is a great team doing incredible things on the energy side of the house. The Just Energy Summit is happening. It actually starts at 4 o'clock today, I think, is the kickoff. And it will be going on different sessions through the week. I cannot remember honestly what the registration fee is, but there are scholarships available, and I feel like it was a very modest registration anyway. But I would encourage any of you who are really interested in energy equity issues to plug into this. There's a lot of great work happening around rural electric cooperatives, education on Public Service Commission, and in a real grassroots way that I've never seen before, to help people understand like who the Public Service Commission is and what level of power they have in regulating our dominant utilities here locally. They have a Just Energy Academy as part of that Just Energy work, which is a leadership development program. And I believe I just saw that we've hired a first new new director in the energy program who was a graduate from one of those academies. So that's an exciting thing. And they're just Energy Circle is sort of an ongoing convening. So this definitely falls into climate action. This is a core focus of this work. And they're also doing a lot of collaborative work with the Atlanta Regional, Archie. I always struggle to center. What? Somebody help me with Archie. It's the health and health equity folks out of Georgia State and the Center for Health Policy, maybe. I'm getting all my acronyms jumbled, but anyway, they do a lot of work sort of at that intersection of public health and energy systems. But climate is definitely a core focus. Atlanta Land Trust is another one that I would imagine some of you may have heard of. Atlanta Land Trust is sort of a newer version of an organization representing this community land trust model here in Atlanta. The community land trust CLT model is something that is getting a lot of visibility around the country right now, with organizations popping up in cities around the U.S. And the idea is basically that it's a permanent form of affordable housing, in that someone who purchases a CLT home is the land underneath that home is being held by this community trust. And the individual or the family purchasing the home is purchasing their home at a lesser price, at a much more affordable price, because they're not paying for those land costs. And when they decide that they eventually want to move and sell that home, it's a negotiated process with the land trust, so that the individuals are able to get some profit in that transaction, some equity that they can then take into their next home purchase. But because of the restrictions on the land sale, it keeps the property value from just really sort of escalating at an unreasonable level. And then you're able to get another CLT member into that home. So it's a really successful strategy that's, again, building a lot of steam around the country. And Atlanta Land Trust is in the young days of their organization here, but it's not a concept that's new. In fact, one of the first community land trust sort of pilots in the world, to my knowledge, was down in Albany, Georgia, back in the 60s and 70s. And I know there are a couple of folks on this call who could shed some more light on that if anybody is interested. But Karen is part of the team over there, and I know she would love to hear from folks who might want to get involved and support that work. Again, anything in my mind that relates to affordability is got to be a part of SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. And I think this may be my last one. This was one that I feel like is just particularly timely, that we all have a chance to connect with folks who were doing some really great work around voter activation and get out the vote in the next month. So this certainly relates to peace, justice, and strong institutions, SDG 16. And this is one that I'm personally less familiar with, but have a couple of friends who have recommended them as one of the stronger organizations to get connected to if you're really interested in helping to ensure that every Black vote gets exercised and counted accurately in the election to come. All right. So I think that is all that I had in terms of slides. Let me change my view here, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen.
Well, before you do that, actually, we did have a request if you could put up the Gangsters to Growers slide again for the contact information there.
Oh, yeah, and I apologize if that one may be one that I didn't actually include the contact info. So I can correct that before I share the deck. Let's see.
Okay. And then Archie is Atlanta Regional Collaborative for Health Improvement.
Thank you. I knew several folks here would know that. I do not have the link on here on Gangsters Growers, but I can. It's Abby Henderson, and let me see.
So if anybody has questions, if you could put in the chat, I will moderate and ask Suzanne the questions. And then after we're done with those official questions, we will just open it up and unmute for everybody just to chat. So a couple of questions that we had is how do you or how does one find out about the work that you highlighted? How do we stay as on top of it as you have been?
Well, I can tell you what I think the answer to that should be, and I will just challenge all of us to step up and be a part of making this happen. I think that plugging these folks into the RCE and ultimately bringing some sort of web capacity to the RCE site that allows us to view information, case studies, videos, contact information for any member organizations. I think is sort of an aggregator function that the RCE could and should be playing. Unfortunately, there's just not another entity that I know of locally that at this point is aggregating that information, particularly across different sort of social issue areas. I think the Greenies know about the Greenies, and the folks that are working on judicial reform know about the other folks in judicial reform, and the housing people know the housing people. But we unfortunately don't get a lot of chance to sort of cross out of those silos enough. And I really think that's a unique thing that the RCE brings to everybody.
Great. Can you give us an example of a project or an area that the Atlanta Land Trust has purchased?
Yes, I know that they have purchased, I want to say it's Tucker Avenue is the project that they have underway right now. I'm certain that they would have information about it on their website, but it is in Southwest Atlanta. I'm pretty sure it's in Oakland City. And I'm fairly certain that it is, if not adjacent to, it's very close proximity to the Oakland City MARTA station. I know they are very much trying to embrace sort of a strategy around equitable transit-oriented development. So where there are train stations that there's affordable land nearby, or that may be actually owned by MARTA, and they're entering some partnerships sort of in a development collaboration with MARTA. I think that's part of where they hope to go. I also think now that I'm saying this, that I believe that most of their focus, at least in the early stage, is going to be not in large multifamily sort of developments, but more single family and maybe townhouse as sort of the maximum density that they would be doing. And there may be somebody else on here, Kate, Grace, I'm looking at you, who may know a little bit more about some of the details of the projects they're working on. But I do know that Tucker Avenue is one that I've heard referenced and that is underway right now. Anybody else have any insight
Suzanne,
on that?
I'm not up to date on what all they have going on these days, unfortunately. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. I know that they're fairly young organizations, so this may be actually the first project that's coming out of the ground. But I'm sure there are many more in the pipeline to come.
Great. I have a couple of questions about your personal experiences. So based on your experience, what are some community engagement strategies that work best and why?
That's an interesting one. I will say, first and foremost, that I have big, strong feelings about community engagement and big ideas about how I think it should be done. And then I have had the challenge and the humility of being in the trenches and trying to do community engagement, and it's hard. So I will tell you that anyone who is really trying to approach it with that humility and a sense of true respect for the community that you're engaging with, you have to give yourself a little grace in knowing that you can try really hard and you may not reach people still. particularly in this COVID period. I can tell you one project that I've been working on with PSC for the last 6 months or so in the city of East Point. And we were desperate to reach folks in rental communities, particularly some of the really lowest income apartment complexes around engaging in a planning process. And we went to such great lengths with meeting with apartment complex owners, seeking out tenant association presidents, being on site on the property, trying to get folks into people's hands, and it still was challenging, and we still got very little return on that investment in terms of the effort. I think in some ways that that was also a great learning experience for me, and a good reminder that some of the big ideas that I know I talk about and PSC talks about a lot in terms of authentic engagement, they're really hard to pull off. And I would say that on some level we did not succeed in doing that. And so what I mean by that is really being less driven by a short-term deadline. And, we have a plan, we have to get engagement on this plan, we need input, blah, 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 by a certain date. And thinking of engagement being something that is a much longer time investment. And I think particularly for local governments, they've got to have their hands in it. They cannot outsource, they cannot hand off engagement to a third party and hope that part of the work can be taken care of. I think if you're going to deal with the sort of even the basic level of reconciliation that communities have with local governments around decades of mistrust that is very real and very legitimate, I think the local government itself or whatever the organization is that's sort of leading the work has got to commit to developing relationships. And I think that's got to be at the base of any kind of community engagement. And that starts with a lot of listening and a lot of being there when you don't have something you need from them, just being there to learn and being there to listen and understand what are their concerns. And so I say all this to say it's really easy to talk about that in big, bold visions, and it's hard. It's really hard. So I just encourage anybody to keep trying. Don't give up because it's hard. It's so worth it, and it's so important.
So as a follow-up to that statement, what do you say are success metrics? How do you know if you're successful in this work?
Well, I think it would depend on the type of project. And what was the context for that community engagement, I guess, if the question is sort of what is the successful metric or the metric of success in community engagement. I think from a development standpoint, we would see that the success metric is that, one of them would be that the residents are on board with a project because they've been a part of the conversation from the very beginning. And so when it comes time for an MPU vote or some other sort of vote or approval that a developer needs, that they don't have hurdles because the community is up in arms about the development now, which slows down their process, slows down their ability to move on their projects. So I think that, our belief is that if you engage them early enough in the process, then you will have a much better chance of having the project reflect the values of that community. I think there's certainly a lot of folks who would include, again, within like that narrow context of some sort of a land use development project, they would include metrics around how many community members were employed during the construction of the project, how many community members were employed in the long-term operation of the project, what level of community benefits were secured by the project, what level of infrastructure investment, additional sidewalks or public art spaces, or you name it, a lot of different infrastructure needs that a lot of communities have. And I think that can be a measure of the success of a more equitable project.
Great, thank you. One of the things that you mentioned was the distrust. What do you think are some things to keep in mind when you are having those hard conversations? Do you have any tips for having a productive conversation?
I think being willing to listen to the community members around, what were the causes of the mistrust in the past? What was their experience during a certain phase of urban renewal? What was their experience with a promise that some elected official made that they never made good on? What was their experience with, someone saying they were going to protect certain trees and then they didn't? I really think you've got to be willing to hear the things that people need to say, they're going to be, maybe particularly if you're a local government person, you may feel like you're being attacked because you've just opened the door to venting about an awful lot that you had nothing to do with. But I think if you consider that from a community member's perspective, you're just with the government, and the same people that came from the government before did them wrong. And so, how can we trust you if you don't even know what they did and you're not willing to listen and to sort of respect that? So I think that's a big early part of that conversation has got to just be acknowledgement. There's an exercise that PSE does in a lot of training work that's a people's history timeline that I would encourage anybody to look into if you're doing work in community. It seems so simple on the surface, but it is such an incredible tool for provoking good conversation around that history. And it's just basically a butcher paper with a timeline that you start to lay out of some major events that may have happened, nationally, things that people would remember around certain milestones in the last few decades, or you can take it back hundreds of years if you want to, but having them in a sort of convening setting be able to add their own milestones to that, and what do they remember about those key moments in history can be a good way to get people to sort of reflect on that past and maybe prepare them a little bit for moving forward in a more authentic way with you.
Great. That's related to another question about how can we educate ourselves in regards to partnership development. What are some of the toolkits that you might be aware of? And you've mentioned one with the PSE's People's History, but are there other toolkits or academies that people should be aware of?
Oh, goodness. Well, it's hard to move my head out of my current context. So I think of partnerships being more between some sort of an entity that has some power, or has been able to exercise that power more in the past, with organizations that may have had less access to power. And in those kind of situations, I do think that it's pretty essential to get some basic education, and it can be personal education around. I mean, if you were waiting to learn about conversations about race and some of the uglier parts of our past, it's time to get off the sidelines, because there is so much information right now, so much great work that's happening. But I mean, I could pull up 15 different lists of 20 different books and podcasts and articles, and that we're just swimming in a sea of great information that I think can help anybody, regardless of where they're starting from in this sort of learning, to just start to build your own capacity around these issues. I think there are tremendous training resources that exist as well, different leadership academies. I mean, you've got folks like Atlanta Neighborhood Development Partnership has a Citizens Leadership Academy. United Way has different leadership academies. I feel fairly confident that that some of our higher ed partners have different sort of offerings for residents to be a part of. ARC, I know, also has, their different offerings around RLI and Link and some of these things. So I would definitely encourage everybody to look for those type of ways to sort of push yourself and develop your own capacity and leadership skills. And I think that if you're trying to build partnerships without feeling like you have that sort of innate understanding and some strength there, then you may find that you're sort of challenged a little bit in the partnership development. I think you just have to do your own work before you can try to build collaborations. I'm not sure that answers the question at all, but I know there are lots of other folks on the line who probably have other good insights on that.
Yeah. Well, the last question that came in was, what is being done or what can be done for collaboration with academic and higher ed?
Well, I mean, again, I think you're all on this line, so somehow you found out about the RCE, and I think this is the golden opportunity here is, we now have a structure to bring together folks who are in community, who are in, higher ed students, higher ed faculty and staff, not-for-profit organizations, businesses. I think we have finally a place where we can bring all of those different sectors together and find, raise your hand and say, okay, I heard there was this great project going on in Philadelphia around food waste or whatever, and I would love to replicate that here in Atlanta. Who's with me? I want to find a few students. I want a faculty advisor. I want a nonprofit partner. I want a business partner, whatever. I think, this is early stage enough in this network that you can make it what you want. And so I would just encourage anyone to start taking advantage.
Sorry, I left a wet mark on the table.
Oh.
Yeah, I was today. Okay, Ben.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I think, this is the place to look for those. And, thanks for your patience if you've been kind of around the edges of the RCE for a while and you've been waiting for some of the infrastructure to sort of build. I think we've made some good progress. I think we also have more work to do. And it's through volunteers like Margaret here who were saying, okay, well, I'd like to have some good conversations with people. I'm going to moderate one. We need more folks to step up and say, this is what I want to see happen. And I'm looking for people to partner with me on X, Y, or Z. And this is a place where I think you can start to find those folks.
Great. Well, Adair just posted something about if you're interested in talking about this further, we will have a civic dinner about racial injustice, and that's October 12th from 7 to 8. In the chat box, there's the link for that. And the next month's Marvelous Monday, we will have Natasha Dyer from the City of Atlanta speaking about recycling and composting. So if you want to join us then, it's October 26th at 3 p.m. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for speaking and sharing about some of the great work that's going on in Atlanta. I will unmute